Haberler.com'dan merhaba, ben Esra Öztürk. Afganistan'da Taliban'a karşı direnişin kalesi olarak nitelenen Pençşir'i konuşacağız. Pençşir'deki direniş gruplarının liderlerine çok yakın bir isimle Amina Ziya Mesud, Afganistan'ın eski Cumhurbaşkanı Yardımcısı Ahmed Ziya Mesud'un kızı. Aynı zamanda Taliban ülke yönetimini ele geçirmeden önce Afganistan'ın Paris Büyükelçiliğinde diplomat olarak görev yapıyordu. Amina, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Please start with introducing yourself to the Turkish audience and your relation with Ahmed Ziya Mesud, Ahmed Massoud, the leader of the resistance in Pençşir, and your grandfather, Burhaneddin Rabbani.
I am a former diplomat of the Afghanistan embassy based in France. I'm the daughter of Ahmed Ziya Mesud, the former vice president of Afghanistan, the granddaughter of Burhaneddin Rabbani from my mother's side. And Ahmed Shah Massoud was my uncle, therefore that makes Ahmed Massoud my cousin.
Thank you. Let us start talking about Pençşir. The Taliban releases footage that the Pençşir is taken over. What is the real situation right now? What are your contacts telling you?
Well, it's very difficult to get factual information out at the moment because unfortunately telecommunications have been cut by the Taliban. However, the information that we are receiving is that it has not been entirely taken over. In fact, the situation is constantly changing. It's volatile. At one moment, it's the governor's office has been taken over by the Taliban, and the next moment it has been retaken. Also, the fact that Pençşir's geography, its topography, is quite difficult for a group to take over because it's such a narrow province, and people are used to hiding in the mountains and then coming back down again when it's convenient. So therefore, I cannot 100% confirm that it has been taken over by the Taliban.
Can we say that the city center is taken, but the fighting is still going on in the rural areas?
Yes, yeah, I think you can say that, yes. And I believe that the fighting will continue going on.
What is the position of the leaders of the resistance groups? How do they approach to the peace negotiations? Do you have any idea about that? Because Ahmed Massoud was calling for a peace negotiation, and Taliban clearly rejected that.
Yes, our position has always been peace. Peace has always been our first position. The Taliban have attacked a province that they have no justification for attacking. In fact, their whole entire ideology was based on taking Afghanistan back from so-called invaders. But I'd like to ask, who are the invaders in Pençşir? Those are regular Afghan people who are protecting their homes and their lands from the Taliban. So it is a difficult situation. There have been casualties on both sides. However, our demand has always been peace at first, but peace does not mean an entire surrender. Peace deal must be a compromise of values, of ideals, of ideology. This is what the Taliban are not giving us. They want us to completely be surrendered. This is unacceptable for us.
Why do people in Pençşir resist? Because some other groups like Hizb-i Islami, they claim that the Taliban should be given a chance to establish an inclusive government which will cover all faces of Afghan people. And now, if this happens, the international community will have no reason, no cause to blame the Taliban. So if they will make a legitimate government, why are the groups in Pençşir against this approach?
Mm-hmm. We are not against an approach of an inclusive government. This is what the Taliban are saying, this is what they're promising, but their promises have not converted to actions at all. In fact, they have started actually creating their own cabinet. And we can see from the people that they have put in various positions that they are all exclusive, actually. It's a very exclusive cabinet that they have made. They're all men, they're all around the same age, they're all Taliban, they're all from the same ethnic group, and they have clearly stated that they are not going to have any woman in the cabinet. So the difference between what Taliban are saying and what they're doing is actually quite great. In fact, before they came to Kabul, they had a meeting in Kandahar for 3 days discussing how a government should be formed. And in that meeting, it was only amongst themselves. There was nobody else who was non-Talib, at least, to give them some insight. I don't believe they have the capacity to accept that there are people with opposing views. Therefore, to give them a so-called chance it doesn't make sense to me unless I see real action by them. And if that's the case, then we would be willing to work with them.
Okay, Amina, you say that you will not be against, the resistance movement will not be against an inclusive government. But it is very short time since Taliban has taken the administration of Afghanistan. Don't you think that you should give some time to see the Taliban will act in the way that they claim?
Well, so far they've been in Kabul since August 15, and I have not seen any differences. In fact, I've been following up human rights reports from the Afghanistan Human Rights Commission, and they are acting exactly the same way that they acted when they first came into power in 1996. They're searching houses, people are being arrested and disappeared, including some of my own extended family members, because a policewoman in Ghazni province in front of her full family, and this is most likely due to her gender and her position. The restrictions that they have imposed on women so far in this little short period that they have been in Kabul are the same restrictions that they had imposed in the past. They said that women are not allowed to leave the house and until they train their fighters to respect women. I think this is a ridiculous statement. So women are supposed to wait until the Taliban are allowed to train their fighters. This is unfair. In fact, I would say the Taliban should not bring their fighters if they're not, they should not bring their fighters to the city if they're not even allowed to, or if they're not even able to respect women.
Would you find it understandable as the whole militia of the Taliban was not in contact with women and they were training in rural areas, and now they will try to adapt the new Afghanistan after the invasion, let's say a democratic Afghanistan, even though they do think that the democracy has no base in Afghanistan?
Well, it's not fair for us as Afghan women, as people who don't agree with them, that we have to wait until they are ready to accept us. I would much rather say that this country belongs to all of us. It's not just theirs, and perhaps they haven't been used to seeing women and so forth, and this is why the Taliban made such a ridiculous statement about training their fighters. But this is not our problem. We still have to get out and work and go about our lives. I would just also like to mention that women's rights, it is not an elitist sort of demand. Most women who work in Afghanistan are the sole breadwinners of their families. I had a friend back in Kabul who was a policewoman, and her father was too old to work and her brother was too young. He was going to school, so she had to provide for her family. This isn't necessarily an elitist argument. It is an argument. Women's rights are human rights, and they should be able to leave their house and work and to be able to live in a country and breathe.
I want to talk about the peace process. Your grandfather, who passed away, Excellency Burhaneddin Rabbani, was leading the higher peace council in Afghanistan. Also, your father, Ahmed Ziya Mesud, was part of the process. What do you think about the peace process? Because recently, Karzai and Ghani governments in person themselves are criticized for failing the negotiations. Tell us about the history of the peace process and now what you are up to.
For me, it's very difficult to accept such a process because of my personal experience with it. The day that my grandfather was killed, I was in Kabul and I saw the scene of his death, and it was horrific, if I may add. I lost trust in this entire process, and I was extremely angry, actually, and emotional. And I think for a long time I was against such a process to take place because I lost trust in the process. I lost trust in international community who were endorsing the process, and I completely lost trust in the Taliban. Actually, the person who killed my grandfather, he was sent as a peace messenger, and he was quite young. He was 25 years old, as I remember. And witnesses inside had told me that when he walked in and he walked over to my grandfather, he kissed my grandfather's hand, which is out of respect with younger people, how they treat older people in Afghanistan. And my grandfather kissed his forehead, which is also a way of showing respect to a younger person in our culture. And it was at that moment that he detonated his bomb. So it was a very, very difficult time for me, for my country, for I think our party and the people who supported, or the people who are part of Jamiat Islami and the entire groups that supported this political party. But I think throughout time, I learned to accept that if my grandfather was still here, he would still probably endorse a peace process. And yes, President Karzai and President Ghani have been criticized for their approach to it. But I think that the person who is most likely responsible for the situation that we are currently in is President Ghani and his government. I think that I believe that if they had not fled the country, a transitional government would have come in power. There would have been some sort of coalition between the Taliban and the government, and we wouldn't have had to compromise our entire values. We wouldn't have to surrender everything to the Taliban.
Do you believe it would work? Do you believe it would work? Because on the one side we are talking about a U.S. affiliated kind of democratic government, a democratic approach, and on the other side we are talking about Taliban, who believes in Sharia and aims to implement that regime. Would such a coalition work in Afghanistan?
I think it would have been better than the situation that we are currently in. That's for sure, that I 100% believe in. And I don't believe that democracy in Afghanistan is a US invention. Democracy was a privilege, was something that the people of Afghanistan had strived for during the time of the last king of Afghanistan, King Zahir Shah, where my parents were children. It was during that time that democracies slowly began to flourish in the country. Different political parties were given a voice to speak in parliament, and it was new to Afghanistan. However, it began from there, I believe. So it wasn't just we cannot say that democracy is entirely a foreign
concept?
A concept, exactly, that has been brought to Afghanistan.
Let's talk about your father's stance. Amina Ziya Mesud was vice president to His Excellency Karzai. And what was his stance at that moment? And did he have any criticism over the process?
Actually, when my father was vice president, the peace process was not initiated at that point. It had not begun. He was vice president during the early years of the government. And after that, when the peace process began, his stance has always been it has always been the same that yes, a peace deal should take place, but it shouldn't compromise all of our values. When we say that it shouldn't compromise all of our values, what I mean is that a peace deal should not be an entire surrender. We have to give and take. What the Taliban are offering at the moment is not a peace deal. They're telling us to completely surrender to them and to completely live by their ideology and their way of governing. This is unacceptable to us.
But there is the fact that the Taliban did not take over the whole country by force, by bloodshed, right? The country, the government was surrendered by the administrators themselves. So in this regard, Pençşir is the only place where there is resistance against the Taliban. There may be a chance to negotiate and come up with a solution.
Well, I think I absolutely agree. Yes, Kabul was not taken by force. The government fled, the Taliban saw a vacuum and they came in, they took over the country. However, it has been 20 years that the Taliban have been fighting. It has been 20 years that they have been terrorizing our cities, our countries, our schools, our hospitals. They have, it was just a year and a half ago, as I remember, that there was a terrible attack in a maternity hospital. So this isn't just, they didn't just come into Kabul peacefully. They fought for 20 years, and I agree that yes, the government, if they hadn't fled, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are today.
Do you think they should stay and fight against the Taliban instead of just leaving?
Absolutely, absolutely. They should have. It's not that we had a problem with our army or that they were not good at fighting or any of that. Our army sacrificed a lot. In fact, we lost around, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 60,000 troops throughout this war, which is a huge number. This means that they have fought, and they have fought bravely. But it was the leadership that was the problem.
What are your contacts in Pençşir telling you? Will they keep on resisting, or are they losing power against the Taliban?
They will absolutely keep on resisting, and in fact, this has inspired resistance throughout the country. I just received news that there was a huge protest in Kabul just literally half an hour ago, and people are resisting throughout the country. This is not just based
women
in
especially, right?
Exactly, and I just have to also mention that I am in complete awe of their bravery, of the confidence of these women going out on the streets and protesting against the Taliban. They are completely breaking all boundaries, and I don't think the Taliban were expecting such a reaction from people. So resistance is not only based in Pençşir at the moment, and I think this will spread throughout the country. I definitely believe so.
What is your message to the Taliban?
My message to the Taliban is that they should accept a compromise, a peace process that is acceptable to all. I understand that the Taliban are a reality of Afghanistan. At the same time, they have to understand that I am also a reality of Afghanistan, that other people are also, people who oppose their views entirely are also a reality of Afghanistan. We will never see peace if we continue fighting with each other. However, if we come to a compromise, this would be the only hope for us to see some sort of peace and stability in our country.
What about the international community?
For the international community, I think it's very important that they do not forget Afghanistan, as they did in the 90s, and we saw the country drowning in drought and hunger and a lot of different issues. At the same time, they should continue with providing humanitarian aid to the people of Afghanistan, which is clearly very, very important and required at the moment. But I also want the international community to be wary of the Taliban and to set conditions so that so the Taliban are not able to rule the country by force and imposition. The international community must support a democratic system or inclusive government coming into place in Afghanistan.
What are you going to do? Now you cannot come back to Afghanistan, right? Are you asked for a political asylum from France?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to travel to Afghanistan at the moment due to my safety. What I really hope is that I will be able to return to my country, to my home, and I can work for my people once again in any capacity that I can. As for political asylum, I cannot talk about that at the moment, but all I can say is that currently my life is not safe in Afghanistan.
Amina, thank you for your time and stay safe and sound.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Evet, Amina Ziya Mesud konuğumuz oldu. Pençşir'deki direniş gruplarıyla doğrudan teması olan bir isim. Eski Cumhurbaşkanı Yardımcısı Ahmed Ziya Mesud'un kızı, Taliban tarafından öldürülen Afganistan'ın eski Cumhurbaşkanı Burhaneddin Rabbani'nin torunu, aynı zamanda Ahmed Mesud'la yakın akrabalık ilişkileri olduğunu söyledi. Mesajlar verdi. Uluslararası toplum insani yardımları kesmemeli, Afganistan'ı 90'larda olduğu gibi unutmamalı dedi. Bunun altını çizmek gerekir diye düşünüyorum. Pençşir'in de şu anda tam olarak Taliban tarafından ele geçirildiğini söylemek mümkün değil dedi. Şehir merkezi ve resmi binalar ele geçirilmiş durumda. Ancak Pençşir'in coğrafi koşulları ve zor bir bölgede olması nedeniyle tamamen ele geçirilmesinin kolay olmayacağını, direnişin, çatışmaların sürdüğünü aktardı. Altyazılı olarak izlediniz. Teşekkürler. Hoşça kalın.